Okay, so Adrian, tell me about the lockdown situation and how it affected you in March in Stuttgart.
Well, the lockdown got just prolonged till the end of March. So actually everyone was hoping for the lockdown to be over like in mid of March, but now they prolonged it till end of March. Oh, sorry, that's my cat.
Mm.
Um, and well, that's a bit frustrating, of course. But at least they also made a plan how step by step they want to end all of these different restrictions. So now already at least the hairdressers are allowed to reopen.
Mm.
And in 2 weeks, I think they want to reopen some of the museums and so on. So at least there is some hope. But the prolongation was a bit frustrating, I have to admit.
Yeah, so gradually. And last year, when it all started, how did you feel? How were you affected initially in 2020? Did you have projects and things that were cancelled at that time?
Yeah, actually, I had several projects that were canceled. I was supposed to go to Paris. I was supposed to write a theater music. And in the beginning, all of this was just postponed. But then a month later, they canceled it. Then they again wanted everything to happen online or whatever. But then again, they needed to cancel. So it was actually quite, the most annoying part for me was not the cancellation itself, but the constant back and forth that like
Oh,
there
yeah.
was never any reliable information. First they canceled, then they said, oh, actually, no, we don't cancel, we just postpone. And for example, this theater music, I think, got postponed now for the third time. And that makes also the work process a bit frustrating.
Yeah, because you are a composer, and um, uh, this time they when you had this quiet time and when nothing happened, were you then inspired to compose, or were you just really a bit frustrated about all the cancellations?
I think more the there was more frustration. In the beginning, I thought that, yeah, okay, I can use all this time to whatever, educate myself, read books that I always wanted to read. But in the end, I think it's always like that. If you think you have lots of time, in the end, you don't really end up doing a lot. So for me, maybe that's also partly my fault, but speaking to lots of colleagues, I think many people experienced this, that they had big plans how they could use the lockdown or how they should use the lockdown, but most of these plans didn't really happen.
Mm.
So for me, it was like I was a bit frustrated. Then I thought I should do something, but the frustration was somehow bigger. I didn't really end up doing a lot.
Mm. So there was no motivation really to do something. No.
I mean, the motivation initially was there, but with each new lockdown, the motivation got smaller. Um, and yeah, it was also like it was changing from time to time. Sometimes I had the motivation, and then I was again not in depression, but like not very
Mm.
productive. And I think that's in the end, as I said before, that's the strangest thing for me, that there's nothing constant anymore. My motivation is not constant, like the lockdown is not constant. You never know what will happen next week. And that's for me the most stressing thing about this whole lockdown. If I would know, okay, lockdown for 1 year,
Mm.
I at least would know, okay, in 1 year, everything will take place again. But this uncertainty makes me a bit worried or a bit unconcentrated, I would say.
Yeah, I also find that it's this thing where you get the hope of something coming up, and then it gets cancelled, and then it's going through that motion again, and then there's another little hope, and then it's got cancelled again. So I think it's this up and down thing that then works on the mind too much.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Mm.
Well, and also the projects that could take place, uh, I don't know. I, for example, had a recording project, but due to the lockdown, I was not able to attend the recording. And I just called the conductor and the sound engineer a couple of days before. And then I listened to the recording and I just realized how crucial it is to be present in the recording. The recording's not bad at all, but it's like not 100% what I intended, and it could have been much better or much closer to my initial ideas, but it was just not possible to have like a Zoom meeting during the rehearsal. So the only possibility was to call everyone before, and then I needed to trust them that they will do everything according to my instructions. But even the most detailed instructions can't substitute this one-to-one contact or this like immediate contact and response that you can give in a live rehearsal. So that was also quite weird to realize.
Yeah, and that's something that you realize because you couldn't do it. If it was just the normal thing, then this importance of it maybe would not have you would not have felt that so much. Do you think that?
Definitely. I think the lockdown experience is in many ways eye-opening. And it's mostly not that you didn't notice these things before or that you didn't know these things before, but you just fully realize the potential of certain things. For example, I myself, I mean, there were live streams before, but the importance of live concerts, it's just like no live stream can substitute that. And I'm actually quite annoyed with all of these live streams because like usually when you have a live stream, you still have all the breaks in between the pieces. So you don't have like a pre-produced video where you can cut and you have like beautiful angles or whatever. You have a rather boring video, I would say. But you don't have this tension and this energy of a live concert. So it's like, I don't know. I'm much more for like pre-produced videos where you can really control every detail, because then everybody knows, okay, this is not a concert. And then the live stream doesn't try to be a live experience, because in the end it's not. It's just me sitting in front of my computer and not really being able to communicate. And also it takes away this, I don't know, every concert somehow is a bit interactive, or not interactive, but I'm free to see what I want to see. For example, when I'm listening to a piece, I can choose which musician to observe, or I can choose if I whatever look into the audience. But when I just have a camera, the perspective is fixed and I can't do anything about it. And for me, like I get bored very easily with this one perspective. And that's
That's
also
very
a thing that I never
interesting.
thought about before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've also never thought about it, but you're raising a very valid point there, that you are basically then seeing what the cameraman is showing. So not you don't have that freedom to look. And actually, now that you mentioned that, this is something that I think a lot about in my photography, for example. The windows that I photograph, not just the windows, but many other things that I photograph, my picture shows a specific point or a specific visual, but there's around that visual there's so much going on, and there's also the feeling around it, the whole experience that I was there, and the memory that I have when I look at the photograph is of course totally different to when I just show it to somebody. And what you've said now is actually 100% the same. It's the person with the camera that has really the firsthand, the sound, the whole experience around, and this person chooses what the audience then sees. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the live stream could be an artwork in itself. If you have different angles, if you really carefully choose all the angles and the details that you show, it could be really refined, and it could be like something on its own, like a film. But in most cases, I think the live stream is really just a substitute to bring the music or the concert at least to some people. And that's, I think, a pity. I think we really need to rethink these formats and really go into depth of their possibilities, because I'm quite sure that live streams have possibilities, but in most cases, this potential is not fully used.
Now, what I also thought about after the last few interviews that I've had with musicians, and also about this live streaming, and is also the sound, because in the sound gets enhanced definitely with the editing of these concerts, or even if it's not live streaming, but the filming of these concerts. And of course, not everybody has the perfect sound system in their house or the television or whatever. So in a way, I wonder if we watch too much of this, our ears would not be used to anymore to the real sound. You know, if all this enhancement of the sound, and you know, that it then when we go to a real live performance, if our ears would not recognize then the sound, or if we then think that sound is not the right sound. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's also a technological question. Like, even if you have the best microphones, the live sound will be a completely different sound. And it's more about the whole experience. The experience going to a live concert is not just the music or the sound. It's really like on many layers. And with these live streams, in many cases, the focus is just on the sound, but then the sound quality is also not that good. And even when you listen to a good recording in MP3, the quality already is not that good anymore. And I think that makes our ears a bit, we lose our ability to really listen to the subtle nuances that recording can have. And yeah, I think this lockdown could give people the chance to really rethink the way they record music. Because especially with classical music, and in huge opposite to, for example, pop music, which is very well produced. Usually when you have an orchestra playing, there are two microphones in front of the orchestra, and then especially when you have a live stream or a live recording, and the sound quality is horrible, you don't hear the subtle nuances in the winds. I was quite baffled when a piece that I just knew from recordings, and I heard it live for the first time, and I was like, wow, I didn't even know that that instrument was playing at that point, because in the recording, it was a bad live recording. I never could hear that instrument. And I think with these live streams, there's anyway, sometimes I feel this weird paradigm shift that the documentation of a performance becomes more important than the performance itself. For example, in a concert where a mistake happened, the instrumentalist said to me afterwards, yeah, don't worry, we will cut it out of the video. That's anyway much more important. I was like, what? No, the video is just for the documentation, to present my music to people that maybe would not be able to see it otherwise. But for me, it's not about this. It's really just a documentation, and I'm very happy to have a very good documentation. But in the end, it's about the performance. And I think this paradigm shift gets stronger with the lockdown.
Do you think that you will now compose differently from this experience, not necessarily on the theme, but that there is a change in how you will compose?
Actually, the last time we spoke, I said no, but that was wrong, I have to admit now, because this one, like, I just recently wrote a piece for orchestra and electronics, and this piece would never have been possible in a live setup. So this piece was specifically written to be broadcasted via radio. And maybe if I adjust certain details, it would also work in a live setting, but the whole way of thinking about the music, because I knew it will not be premiered live. I knew it will be recorded in a recording sessions with a good sound engineer and a good orchestra, and we can control many details that in a live experience would never work out as they do in a recording session. And that changed my personal approach, definitely. But I'm quite sure that as soon as live events will take place again, I'll also come back to my not old style, but like that won't be a solution anymore. I was quite aware that this is just for this specific piece. But I don't know, maybe it will, this quality of like this pre-recorded sound will stay. I can't say that now. Maybe in a year I'll be able to say more about that.
But have you ever questioned what you're doing, that you think in this time where you really felt, you know, is it worth it?
Somehow yes, and somehow no. I was never completely questioning if I'm doing the right thing or not. I know that I am a musician and I can't somehow change that. Like I would be extremely depressed if I would need to stop working as a musician. But of course, if you don't have the possibility to share your art, it is frustrating. And from time to time, you ask yourself, maybe not why am I doing this, but how should I continue doing this? Like, what can I do? And how can I find new solutions that combine these different approaches? How can I give people this experience without a live concert? And until now, I didn't find any solution that really made me happy. And also I didn't see any solution. We'll see. I think if the lockdown will continue, we just need to get used to this. But I think it's always very important that we don't lose the respect for the live event, because it's a completely different thing. Yeah, I think that's the most important part. In pop music, it's quite common, for example, to sing playback or something like this, but then it's really about the whole performance. And that actually shows for me that it's not just about the sound. The sound may be pre-recorded, but it's about the tension also between the audience members. And that's something that nothing ever will substitute. We can have different forms online, but these will never be, at least for me, a good substitute.
But maybe also this time will now make us think about that. And then when there, you know, when people watch a lot of these streamings, then and they will go back to a live performance, then completely see the difference or feel the difference. You know, that can also be the case, that when something is taken away from you, you really think about that and then appreciate it more when you get it.
Definitely. I hope that will be the case. And I think in general, we really need to be careful to appreciate what we have. I think also I'm like now ranting about these live streams, but at least people can perform, which is also a good thing. But sometimes I ask myself if it wouldn't be better to really stop the cultural life for a month or whatever, to really cut culture off. Because for many people, culture is just like a way of entertainment. And to be honest, Netflix is better at this kind of entertainment. So I think people should reconsider this value that culture has and not just take it as entertainment, but like really a crucial part of our being. And I have the feeling that sometimes people forget this, that they take everything for granted. That, oh yeah, musicians are there, they entertain us, and they do this whatever happens. We don't need to pay them, and even in a lockdown, they still work for us to amuse us or to entertain us. But that's actually not quite the point. I think the relationship between society and art is much more diverse and much more complex. And we should be very careful that people don't underestimate the value of culture.
But talking about Netflix, something I've also thought about is that, I mean, I was a teenager in the 80s, and for example, if I compare the movies that we used to watch compared to now, and now all the special effects and all these action films, if that also makes, or creates a society where we really want, and if you look at pop concerts and things like that, there's somebody flying up the ceiling, and it's lights, and it's all these laser lights and things like that, that we sort of get used to that extreme hype, and that going into say a classical music concert, then for some people is there's not enough entertainment. Do you think that could be a problem as well?
It is already a problem, I would say. People are used to shows where like every minute something new happens, and as you said, we see it in our movies. I just recently watched the super old My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn, and it's extremely long. They're interludes of like 5 minutes where nothing happens. It's just image and music. And I watched it with a friend, and he was freaking out. He was like, no, I can't watch this. It's too long and it takes too much time to tell the story. But for me, that was quite relaxing, because I could really, the story took the time that the story needed. The story is not the most complex and interesting story, but somehow it was, this care for detail was very nice to observe. And I think that's sometimes lacking in a way. And I see it with myself that sometimes like the time that I can concentrate gets shorter and shorter, also with each live stream. Like in the beginning of the lockdown, I was willing to watch 2 hours of live stream. And now I'm quite tired after already 10 minutes of live stream, because it's on my computer. I can always switch to something else. I can, if I'm bored, I just click on pause and whatever, listen to Spotify. And this makes culture in a way very present, but on the other hand also very unpresent somehow. It's always there, but it loses its importance and its uniqueness, because I can always choose, always switch, and it's fine. And I think it would be really refreshing for culture to somehow, I don't know, to go a bit away from this omnipresence and this constant overflow of information. And I would be happier to have like 2 very well-crafted live streams instead of 500 live streams that are all okay.
But also the thing that I think about a lot is the contact with the artist. So you mentioned before that that to cut the arts, to cut the culture, the cultural things, and many artists in this line says that artists are not valued. So it's not specifically the arts, but it's the artists that are not valued. And do you feel the same?
Definitely. People sometimes forget that there's a person that created this, and that this person also needs to be paid. And I think people think just because we really love our profession that it's more like a hobby, and that the joy that the art itself brings to us is enough. It's enough as a payment. And I received offers to write an hour of music for no money or ridiculous amounts of money, and I was just baffled how how people sometimes dare to ask these questions, and also how people that are, I mean, all of us are somehow in a bubble. Most of my friends are artists or somehow connected to art or interested in art. But when you go out of these bubbles, people really think that, yeah, it's a hobby and that we are mainly jobless, which, of course, during the lockdown to some extent is true. But people think, like many people don't think that that is a crucial problem, while they don't understand what that actually means if the artists don't get paid. And I think it's not only the artists. When I look at the cultural scene in Germany at the moment, it's still somehow functioning, but it depends how long this lockdown will continue, because like many small theaters needed to shut down, many small bars and clubs where also concerts took place needed to close, because they just don't have the money anymore. And I think if we open everything, the scene will be much smaller. And I think, yeah, people don't know that yet, but I think many people will be quite surprised by how empty the cultural scene will be after the lockdown.
Yeah, I also think that the value that you talking about, good. No, there's two sides. It's the financial value and the value in the sense that I'm talking about the respect, where people are not aware. For example, if I take myself, I love music and I have two children who are ballet dancers, so I understand, a little bit, but of course, the more artists I met, the more and composers and aspects that I didn't really know too much about, and I understood then how many years they have to study, or you have to study, and the effort that goes into being this artist. And I wonder sometimes that if this is not, I would not say ignorance, but more of not understanding. Understanding. If you say I'm a composer, that people not really understand what you are doing, or how did you become a composer.
Mhm.
But the moment we talk about an engineer, or we talk about a scientist or a doctor, or then we immediately know, oh, because they have to study 7 or 8 years, or and not that I say doctors are not valuable. Of course they are valuable, but we understand their value because we understand what they're doing, whereas with artists we don't always understand. And I
And
wonder
I think,
sometimes if we could talk a bit more about this, and this is also the aim of these conversations that I have, that people get an insight on what it is to be an artist.
definitely, I think also it's a question of education. And for example, if I would sum up all the money that my parents spent to so that I could have violin lessons, piano lessons, sing in the boys' choir, go on concert tours, have composition lessons, then all the studies that I needed to do. And that started when I was like, I don't know, 5 years old. And if you want to become a doctor, of course, some children are already interested at a very young age, but you don't necessarily need to have um, how to say, I don't even know the word in
This
German.
preparation, this early start, yeah.
Yes, somehow, because like if I would not have started at this early age, I would not be able to do what I'm currently doing. While if many people don't even know what they want to study after finishing school, and then they choose any subject and then they work in this subject. But as an artist of any profession, it needs to be inherent to you from the very beginning. Um, and I think that's also connected to the way that art and music are taught at schools. In my music lessons, and I was at a school that had this strong profile for music, but still our music lessons were not the best. They were actually quite horrible, because most of the time we were just singing folk songs, and learning the basics about music history, but most of these people can't even read music. They don't even know what the music is actually about, and whether that's pop music, which has also lots of references to like sociological questions, to subcultures, whatever. It's not only about classical music, and the
Mm.
same applies to the visual arts. We were just painting, and then she was like, yeah, that's a nice apple, well
Mm.
done. But we never learned anything about art history, about the development of art and its connection to society. We never needed to read any philosophical books about art. Um, that's something that just takes place at the universities. But when you compare it to how the other subjects are taught, like mathematics, biology,
Exactly.
whatever, you have a very solid and grounded education that covers lots of aspects, while music and art are always like the fun subjects where you can relax in between the proper subjects. And I think that's so wrong, because if you would educate children from the start to really take music and the arts serious,
Mm.
I think the whole perception of society would diametrically change.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I
totally
think
agree
it's
with you. Yeah.
education is the crucial point to so many things, whether that's like sexism in society, or how much this society values the arts. Um, and people are sometimes so naive. I recently spoke to a woman, and she told me, yeah, actually, I also was thinking after school to study music, but then I realized I can't read music. I never played an instrument. And I was like, yeah, that's not quite how it works, because she just thought she can just like inscribe to the subject and then study it like she would study any other subject, like law or whatever. But with these other subjects, it's possible to just inscribe to this, first of all, because you don't need to have this early start. And second of all, because you have already this
Yeah.
education, because you
Mm.
get it in school. And musical education and also artistic education usually take place outside of the school, and you need to pay for this. And even then, it's never completely solid. Even if you learn an instrument, that doesn't mean that you learn things about music theory. And even if you go to art school, that doesn't mean that you really think a lot about arts. It's mainly the practical aspect, painting, playing the instrument, or whatever. But that's not the only thing that art is. Art is so flexible in so many ways and can manifest itself in so many different genres, whether that's ballet, film, whatever. And I think that should be much more part of society, to have this understanding of art.
Mm.
While science, for example, in Germany is divided into each science. You have biology, you have chemistry, you have whatever. And with art and music, it's just music and art. And art can be whatever, but usually you just draw or paint, which I think is a pity. And also in many of the federal states, at some point you need to choose between art and music. You can't do both. For example, I myself needed to stop having art lessons because it was not possible to have music and art at the same time, because they were considered not that important.
Yeah, but you see, this is also exactly what I'm thinking, that it is about the education, and if you look at it, it's not that we're just speaking it and speculating about it. It's There are scientific proof now that the brain the brain changes, the brain develops differently uh, when you do art, when you do music, when you move. I spoke to a doctor, a psychologist, Dr. Peter Lovat, the other day, and he said the same thing about movement, about dancing, and it's exactly what you say. If these subjects are after school subjects or side subjects, and it's just parents have to pay for it, or you can only do it when your parents have the interest in sending you. So there are many children who don't come from a musical family, and then the parents think, Well, I'm not sending him for piano lessons or violin lessons. And these children don't have a choice until they are 16 or 17 where they can make that decision. But as you say, then it's almost too late.
Yeah. And some
Mm.
families also don't have the financial possibilities to,
Exactly. Yeah.
especially if they have several children
Mm.
and whatever, the piano lessons cost 100 euros per month. If you have 5 children that want piano lessons, that's already 500 euros per month, which is a lot.
Yeah.
So I think,
And
yeah,
just,
this should be
yeah,
incorporated more.
on this topic of art, for example, I spoke to a violinist last night, and he told me that he is making now the art for his recordings himself. So he's a musician, he's a artist, and or a painter. He does painting as well, and uh, that as well. That is also so linked, and it's a part of expressing. And this is also what I find with a lot of artists, musicians starting to paint or starting to do photography or filming or something like that. So it is a way of expressing. It's this creativity that's that's there. And actually, if you think of creative minds, uh, you know you need creativity for science as well, for problem solving, for thinking of solutions and things like that. So I think they are definitely linked, all these subjects, and our children could just benefit from it
Definitely,
at the
I
end of
think
the day.
music and arts are crucial for the abstract way of thinking. And this abstract way of thinking is presented in a very sensual way, which makes it maybe easier to understand these abstract processes. But actually, inside, my mother is a scientist, so I know really how it is. And actually, our way of working is very similar. In the beginning, usually we don't have anything. She needs to think of the project that she wants to investigate. And then she needs to think, okay, I want to, whatever, cure this illness. Then she needs to, so that's like the first starting point. And then she needs to also somehow with creative strategies, she needs to find solutions. And then she develops these and writes grants to get the financial possibility to actually realize this. And then if she's lucky, she gets it. And then she can do it. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't work. And actually it's the same with music. You need to have an idea, and then you need to think of the best way how to present and develop this idea. Then usually you need to apply for financial aid or like some grants. Then you get it or you don't get it, and then you'll see how successful that was. So the abstract processes are the same, just the concrete way of manifestation is a different one.
Mm.
And actually, funny enough, many scientists are also very good musicians. I
Really?
know many people that studied medicine and then studied composition, or the other way around. So there is definitely a link between these
Mm.
things.
But tell me, I know you don't come from a musical family. Your parents are, as you say, your mom is a scientist and your dad is also not a musician. Um, how did you start with music?
That was a complete accident, I would say.
Mm.
My mom is from Poland, and my parents met in Braunschweig, where they studied both, and then they moved to Cologne. Um, and there was no place in the scientist student dormitory, so they needed to stay in the musicians dormitory. And then I was born into this context of musicians, and all of my babysitters were musicians. So somehow already at this early age, I got in contact with music. Like my father plays guitar as a hobby, and my mom used to be a ballet dancer. So they have a connection to
Oh.
music, but not in a professional way.
Mm.
But then at this early age, I got exposed to this in a very strong way. And then at the age of 2, I took different plastic things and a plastic flute, and I wanted to play the violin. And then my parents went to a violin maker and asked if that's possible. And I mean, that was 20 years ago. He said like, oh no, your child is way too young, which I think in the aftermath, it's a pity. I should have started with something. But from that point on, I wanted to become a musician. And then I also went to the opera for the first time. I saw Mozart's Figaro, and I was blown away. Like, and again, it was not just the sound, it's the combination of theater, of image, of poetry, of costumes, and the music. And like this symbiotic mix made it so interesting for me. And at that point, I knew I want to become a composer. I want to write an opera, and I could barely read music. I was maybe 4 years old, and I just took music paper. I wrote first opera, scored it for the instruments that I knew, which was piano, guitar, recorder, flute, and violin.
Yeah.
And I just wrote notes until everything was full. And I was so proud of myself.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. And do you still have that?
I still have that, yeah. But of course, I mean, it's not the most interesting music. I didn't know what I was doing, basically. I knew some of the basics. But it's funny to look at it, because sometimes even in the super early pieces, I discover, of course, on a completely different level, I discover processes and strategies that I still use up to the present day, like certain ways of thinking about polyphony, for example, or polymetrics. I had already in these very first pieces. Of course, just like the root or the very first beginning. But I think there's definitely a tradition that I continue.
Wow. This is amazing. And what did you say? What age were you when you wrote that first one?
I don't remember. I think like I wrote several small pieces before. I was maybe 4 years old. And then my father got me some very cheap notation software so that I could try out a little bit and listen to my first compositions. And I was just writing operas, one opera per day. Like I didn't really have any idea what I was doing, but like through this try and error, somehow everything got more and more complex, more and more connected. And then this was always just a hobby, but I loved to sing as a child. Then when my parents moved to a different city, finally I could have violin lessons. And then when we moved to Dresden, I was like 8 years old, I think. Then I went to the boys' choir. I got exposed to a huge range of different musical styles. I went to the school with the music profile, all by accident. This was just the school that was closest to our home. And by accident, it was a school that had this profile for music. And then I started to also have composition lessons in Dresden. And then somehow everything started and evolved. But this desire for music was there from the beginning.
Oh, that's amazing. That's such a wonderful story, and how everything fell in place for you.
Yeah, but like most of the things were complete coincidences, or like most of these things were not planned. But somehow in the end, everything led to this point where I'm now.
Well, I think it's also to do with, I believe if we have a dream, then the things will fall in place for the dream to be realized, that and I think also, artists have this ability to have the dream, that you from a young age already had this idea of just writing an opera, and the dream of doing it, and all these things fell in place without you even knowing, but for you to become that and for you to be able to write it. And that's so great, that's as I say, I think the artists are the dreamers of the world. But in this time that we are so faced with all these uncertainties and things, I still think that you still have the ability to think yourself outside this, you know, away from this, and the future. Because the fact that you say, well, you want to be doing this, and there's nothing else for you, it means that you see in the future that you will be doing it. And I also think that artists have the skills to overcome this situation, and to deal with this situation, and to deal with the disappointments, you know, because this is part of this path that you have gone on, you know, that it's not always that easy.
Yeah. And you don't rely on your personal strength only, but you somehow have this communal strength of the arts itself. It's somehow this inner desire that you have from this early childhood becomes your subconscious motivation to continue, and you have this strong tradition that you can somehow rely on, and you're just like somehow in the flow. So there's always something that keeps you going, and through that you can also help other people to overcome struggles if they let you.
Yeah. Tell me, what is your wish for when this is all over?
I would say that my main wish is that culture becomes again more important as what it is, not just pure entertainment, but like a crucial part of our human being, like a part that people realize that without art, like also the whole rest is not really worth it. There's this nice saying, culture is not everything, but without culture, everything is nothing. And I think that's so true, and people should realize this a bit more. And when I see how, I mean, in Germany, the cultural situation is very good, and we have funding also in these days, everything's kind of fine. In other countries, the situation is much more crazy somehow, much more unsupported by government. But I see how culture in Germany also gets defunded, how institutions need to close, how opera houses need to close, how the money gets less and less. And I would wish that culture, that the society realizes how important culture is and gives again more money. And not only money, but also more energy to culture. It's not only about the money, but it's also about, as you said in the beginning, it's also to really value what you have in this culture and in the arts.
Yeah, and it's this respect, you know. I think I feel strongly about that. That respect, to understand that what you do comes with a great sacrifice. It comes with many hours of, I mean, I strongly believe that if we talk about money value, it's a difficult thing, because for an artist, how do you even you know, compensate with money for the hours that you've put into whatever you know, your instrument or
yeah, that's impossible.
Yeah,
then all of us would need to be billionaires.
Yeah, but the respect, you know, and the understanding, and yeah, I think definitely that is, and also, you know, we should not forget that, like I say, in the sense, I think also you will come up with solutions, because the mind of the artists should also be respected, because I think also your minds are, if you just see how much has been done, and if I just see what artists are doing, just moving on, and doing and trying, and doing their best to do something, you know, to not just say, well, okay, well, that's not possible. And if you think the theaters, just all the effort the theaters go through to make it safe for the artists, to make it safe for the audiences, you know, it's that we should also respect and admire, is that mindset, you know, and learn from, I think, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to sound kitschy, but I think people should discover also their inner artist. Because
Yeah.
I think art is nothing that you can learn, but I think art and this, it's just a way of perceiving everything around you.
Mm.
And the more you learn about art, the more that changes your perception of your surrounding. Like there's nothing what I see when I look at the buildings in the street opposite to my building. I somehow see the rhythm of the architectural structure and so on. So I connect everything to my own art. And I think that's a very valuable and unique experience that everyone should discover for themselves.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. But Adrian, thank you so much for your time again and speaking to me. Such a lovely insight and yeah, your outlook on also on the education I find fascinating, and of course because you are also in this family with scientists, and you can see the connection and how it can work together. So that's wonderful. I wish also that, you know, that in that sense that children would have the ability to be educated, not just to become musicians, but also to find a different way of expressing themselves. I think this is also a
Yeah.
very important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs to become a professional, but just to have
Exactly.
this way of thinking is very crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. But and best of luck with all your projects. I hope gradually and slowly, as you say, things are opening and starting again. And if you have anything that you would like me to put in the description of this video, a website or projects that you have been working on, or a link to music that you've composed, then please send it to me and I'll put them in this description.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this project. I think it's amazing that you give the artists, I mean, you yourself are an artist, but that you give this voice, and which is not just one voice, which is like a multifaceted, always developing voice. But I think it's a great project, and I wish you all the best with the project and the book that you want to write.
Thank you so much. I don't see myself as an artist. I just think I've got a camera and I'm at the right place at the right time. So, but I think, but for me, it's very important that artists have at least a platform to speak, and you know, it's me interesting everybody's story, and everybody gives some great value to it. And yeah, I think it's, you know, we can learn a lot from you as musicians, artists, dancers, and so on. Yeah. But thank you so much and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.